All right. Well, welcome to the Book Scoop, books that we are excited about for spring of 2021. My name is Dori Olivos, and I'm the Adult Services Manager at Rocky River Public Library. And I'm here with my colleague, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, Dori.
Hi.
Hello. I am Mary Morielli. I'm an Adult Services Library Associate, and I'm also a Library Associate for the Outreach Department. It's good to see you today, Dori.
It's good to see you too. It's been a while.
It has.
All right. Well, we're going to get started. Mary's going to start with her first choice for spring. Let me see if this works. Yep, here we go.
Ah, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to start off talking about The Four Winds. It was actually released on February 2nd, so it's already been released, but you will want to get on a holds list for this. It is Kristen Hanna, who has become almost like, the James Patterson of drama. She's extremely popular. So The Four Winds, Texas, 1934. Millions are out of work, and a drought has broken the Great Plains. Farmers are fighting to keep their land and their livelihoods as the crops are failing, the water is drying up, and dust threatens to bury them all. One of the darkest periods of the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl era, has arrived with a vengeance. In this uncertain and dangerous time, we meet Elsa Martinelli. Like so many of her neighbors, she must make an agonizing choice: fight for the land she loves or go west to California in search of a better life. So a little backstory on Elsa. She grew up in a kind of a mean family, kind of an unloving family. She is one of three daughters, and her parents consider her to be unmarriageable material, basically because she's a little tall, she's a bit of an introvert, and just slightly, a little bit awkward. So they view her as nothing but a wet towel around their neck. And that's just, that's how she feels about herself as well. So Elsa goes into town at some point. She's in her 20s and she meets a gentleman, and she comes back and tells her parents she's met a gentleman. And somehow in the story, the father finagles it so that she ends up marrying this gentleman. And while you're not sure that this is a good thing, what inevitably happens is that she lands in a loving home with this new husband and his parents, who are very kind and supportive people. So we learn about Elsa back to they are now in dangerous times. She's, having to face a tough choice. The story unfolds from there. So what I can tell you is this is Kristen Hanna. So if you have the same relationship with Kristen Hanna that I have, she will rip out your heart and throw it on the ground and stomp all over it. And somehow your heart will remain beating for these incredibly endearing, kind, tough characters that she brings to her novels. And I think that's what makes her so popular. Another thing that she does so well in this novel that she's done in past novels, I felt this way when I read the Alaska novel. Why am I blanking on it, Dori? What is the name of that? The Great Alone. She is fantastic with describing imagery. She makes it seem so majestic. She makes the reader feel like you are standing right there. A quote out of her current book, The Four Winds, it says, "The dust storms were so well described." I'm sorry, this is a reviewer wrote this. "The dust storms were so well described, I could envision how horrible a twister of dust blowing at 50 miles per hour would be. So forceful that it got between every small crack in the house. In the beginning, the beautiful wheat fields were described, how tall, golden, and strong the wheat stalks were, and went on for acres and acres." I mean, this is very typical of Kristen Hanna. She does a fantastic, fantastic job of describing the environment. Another thing, the last thing that I'll say that's fantastic about Kristen Hanna is that she really does her research. And again, another reviewer wrote that The Four Winds is a work of fiction, but Ms. Hanna drew on documents, films, and memories of those who survived the Dust Bowl, left Texas or Oklahoma in search for a better life in California. So she does her work. She earns her good reputation, and any review that I read about this, it's not go into it eyes wide open. It's not, it's a tough story, just like Kristen Hanna likes to write, but a good one.
Yeah, I've actually never read her books before, but this one sounds intriguing. I like that time period. So I think I would really like it. All right, I'm going to start with a book that's actually nonfiction, and it came out in January, and I just started listening to it. It's by George Saunders, who, I don't know if you know who George Saunders is, but he has written one novel, Lincoln in the Bardo, which won a bunch of awards, and he's also kind of known for his short stories. One of his short story collections called The 10th of December is was very popular and very well received. This book actually is it's kind of interesting. So he was trained as an oil engineer, and he feels like he became a better writer and reader by reading the 19th century Russian authors like Chekhov and Tolstoy. And so for the past 30 years, since he's been, instead of being an engineer, he's been a writing instructor at Syracuse University. He teaches a class about short story writing kind of based on these authors. So he takes that experience and he puts it in book form, picks only 7 short stories, while in the class they talk about like 31 or something like that. And so each story is printed in full, and as we read the story, often one page at a time, he then offers the kind of commentary on the story's structure, what makes the reader keep reading, and raises like questions about the energy flow, how meaning is made. And it's very funny. It's very philosophical. He really wants us to become better readers. And if you are a writer, it would help to become a better writer and see how great stories can tell us about how to live. I've only gotten through the first story, which was a Chekhov story, but the actual audiobook is read by him, and then each of the stories is read by a famous actor or actress. The first story is read by Felicia Rashad, I think. So they do a really lovely job of reading the stories, and then he sort of talks about each story and, what to look for and ask questions before you get to the next page of kind of what to look for. And it's not, pedantic or, I don't know, like a lecture could be stuffy or anything like that. It's just really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to it. I love to read, and I would love to become a better reader. And I think this might make me become a better reader. I just wanted to give you a quote that he writes in the story. The resistance in the stories is quiet at a slant and comes from perhaps the most radical idea of all, that every human being is worthy of attention, and that the origins of every good and evil capability of the universe may be found by observing a single, even very humble person and the turnings of his or her mind. So I love that quote. And yeah, so far, so really kind of fun and interesting and a great thing to dive into in this winter of our, COVID time. It's like getting an instruction from a professor, a really good professor that you loved in college, a reading instruction. So I would highly recommend it. All right, we will go to the next one.
So I just wanted to say quickly that I did read Lincoln in the Bardo, and I loved it. It was like nothing I'd ever read before. Very odd and but fantastic. And it was one of those things that made you feel like, I just read something way outside of my box, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, that audiobook is also really good. It's acted like multiple actors, act it out, kind of read it, because it is sort of like a play in many ways. Yeah, really good.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, Dori.
Sure.
All right, so the next one, the Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. So I just want to talk, before I talk about the book, just a little bit about Pip Williams. She is from Australia, I believe, an author from Australia. This is a debut novel for her. She started writing, I think her first published writing thing was a poem in a magazine when she was 15 years old. So she's been writing for a while, and I watched this lovely interview. It was just a little blurb. It wasn't long at all. And I wrote down this quote that she said in the interview about this book, The Dictionary of Lost Words. Again, bear in mind, she's probably been writing for at least 30 years now. She said, I used to think dictionaries were for looking up the spelling or the meaning of words, and I never questioned their authority. Then I realized the first Oxford Dictionary, the quotations on which the definitions were based, were from books written almost entirely by men, and that it was men making decisions about which words would be included and which words would not. It made me think that something was probably missing, and from that thought, the whole story unfurled. So I always find it kind of interesting to see how authors came to their ideas. So this is a piece of fiction that is it is based on actual events. It is based on a team of male scholars who compiled the first Oxford English Dictionary. And one of their daughters decides to collect the objectionable words they omit. So this is the novel. Now I'm speaking of the piece of fiction. Esme is born into a world of words, motherless and curious, very curious. She spends her childhood in the scriptorium, which the scriptorium is essentially the garden shed. This is where her father and a team of dedicated I knew I'd mess this up. How do you say that? Lexicographers are collecting words for the very, how do you say it, Dori?
Probably lexicographers.
There you go. They are collecting words for the very first Oxford English Dictionary. Esme's place is beneath the sorting table, unseen and unheard. One day, a slip of paper containing the word bondmaid flutters to the floor. Esme rescues the slip and stashes it into an old wooden case that belongs to her friend, Lizzie, a young servant in the big house. Esme begins to collect other words from the scriptorium, the garden shed, that are misplaced, discarded, or have been neglected by the dictionary men. They help her make sense of the world. Over time, Esme realizes that some words are considered more important than others, and that words and meanings relating to women's experiences often go unrecorded. While she dedicates her life to the Oxford English Dictionary, secretly she begins to collect words for another dictionary, the Dictionary of Lost Words. So the story is about Esme, but Pip Williams, the author, has read up on the lives of the male scholars that put together the Oxford Dictionary. And it is quoted that the first Oxford English Dictionary was created in 1901 only by men. Archives have proved that there were female volunteers, assistants, and spouses, none of whose contributions were acknowledged. So Williams brings these people to life in her novel. A big part, again, if you remember in the beginning, Esme is motherless, and she does at some point in the book befriend a suffragette. So this is going on during the height of the suffragist movement. So it's a super exciting time. She has wonderful role models in her life, and her insatiable curiosity is really what, pushes her on to create the Dictionary of Lost Words. It sounds good. I'm excited about it.
It does sound really interesting. I know there's another book about like the writing of the OED, I think it was like a narrative nonfiction, maybe by Winchester. I can't remember, but it got a lot of, it was very popular years ago.
Oh.
And I think that's a fascinating idea. So, all right. So I'm going to share with you the book called The Removed by Brandon Hobson. I have actually never heard of this author, but this book was on tons of lists of, books to look forward to in 2021. So I thought, I would pick it because it sounds fascinating, although very, 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 very sad. It just came, yeah. It just came out this week, February 2nd. The author is actually, he's a professor at the University of New Mexico. He's also a member of the Cherokee community. So it's, we don't get that many books from a Native American perspective. I think we're getting more and more as publishers seek that out, but that's another reason I wanted to include this. So, sorry, my cat is
that's great.
meowing in the background. So this is about a family, the Akota family. So they're kind of reckoning with the tragic death of their son, Ray, who was killed by a policeman. So we learn about kind of each family member and how they're dealing with the trauma and the grief of that. The father has Alzheimer's. The mother has to deal with his Alzheimer's. Ray's younger sister is kind of filling her solitude with romantic fancies, and his brother slipping into drug addiction. From what I've read, it sounds like he has a really amazing gift for getting into, making you feel the characters and understanding the characters and being interested in their lives. Oh my goodness, George. He also, weaves together with sort of this current story, past and present traumas of the Cherokee community with stories, mythology, kind of visits from ancestors. And each family member then is detained by some of these kinds of strange events, like a foster child that they take in seems to have the dead boy's spirit. And then the father's Alzheimer kind of slips away while this foster child is there. The daughter is attracted to kind of a dark, violent man, where I'm not sure where that will lead. And the son finds himself detained in a sort of purgatory called the Darkening Land, where his drug addiction is the least of his problems. So it's kind of a mix of like a real story, but with these elements of mythology and storytelling, and it sounds fascinating to me. So all the while, all this family is being watched over by the spirits of their ancestors who still walk the Trail of Tears. So to me, I think it is deeply sad, but I think it also sounds like it's an incredible story of strength. The family finds, strength together eventually, I think. And, I'm looking forward to reading it. I have it on hold and I need to pick it up at the library this week. So.
I have also seen that on a ton of lists for 2021, lots of the most anticipated, the best so far.
Yeah, he had a previous book that was, I guess, nominated for a National Book Award, which I wasn't familiar with. I'll have to see if I can find that, if I like this one, but yeah.
It's nice to have, like you said, about Native Americans, because, you always think, is it Lois Edridge?
Louise Erdrich, yeah.
Yeah, and Tommy Orange. So now we have another name.
Right, yeah. And then there was another one this summer, not this summer, this fall. I think it was a horror book that one of our colleagues, Nicole, really liked. I can't remember the name of the author. Stephen, do you know who I'm talking about?
10 Little Indians or
something like that. Yeah. That's another author, Stephen Graham, or I believe his name is. Yeah, more and more, we're hearing more and more from some different kinds of voices. So always important.
Yes.
All right.
Bicycling with Butterflies. So I chose this book because this is going to be our community read. A little, not so well-known secret that this summer, our summer reading is going to be, can I say it, Dori? Am I allowed to speak it? Yes. Okay.
Yes, sorry.
It's going to be, that's okay. Tales and Tales. TAILS and TALES. And so this is chosen as one of our community reads, Bicycling with Butterflies. I actually have it right here. I've been reading it. So to me, butterflies, summer, bicycles, it just shouts summer. So this is a piece of nonfiction, and it's the long title is Bicycling with Butterflies, My 10,201 Mile Journey Following the Monarch Migration. So the author, Sarah Dykman, is an outdoor educator and field researcher who has decided to do something that no one had ever done before. Pedal along with the monarch butterflies over the entire length of their more than 10,000-mile migratory journey. She did it alone on a hand-built bicycle through 3 countries. It's very interesting. I haven't finished the book yet, but it begins in Mexico. That's where she begins. That's in it's in the winter, like late winter, and that's where the butterflies begin. So she's in a country where they speak, Spanish, and she says that she has the, Spanish capability of like a 3-year-old. So, and she's completely on her own. She has built this bike, which is just terribly heavy because it has to be, it does have to go over all kinds of terrain. So aside from the bike itself being very heavy, she has packed it with like tons of stuff. Essentially, like imagine backpacking, your tent, your cooking equipment. She has her laptop, all her essentials, all packed in this thing on her bicycle rack, and she's just pedaling along, following the monarchs. And again, she's on her own, and she really has to learn to rely on her gut, because she meets many people along the way. Everybody has been kind. Some could care less what she's doing, but everybody seems to be interested. And she has to sort of rely on her own gut if someone is being too intrusive or kind of weird. And she has moments like that. And she also brings, obviously the whole point of the book is that she talks about the monarchs and why it's important to support the monarchs and to keep their migration available for them, their journey in their migration. She talks about the butterflies. She talks about how they survive. She talks about plants along the way that they look for. It's just, and of course she puts in, she's a conservationist, so she always has her pieces of, why, we don't own the earth as humans, we have to respect it, and while you may see a butterfly as nothing, that's another living being, and why it's so essential and important to have that respect and to keep butterflies and other, beings like that, to keep them thriving. So I'm only halfway through the book. I look forward to finishing it and to sharing it with people who will hopefully be reading it over the summer.
Yeah, and we'll have some other programming around it too. I think we have some people coming in to talk about pollinator, importance of monarchs, and preservation of their habitat and that kind of thing too. So look for that in the sometime this summer.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come. It's coming, people. I can't wait.
And Dori, it's like the cover. It's
I know the cover's
so
beautiful.
pretty.
Yeah.
You want to have that on your shelf.
Yes. When you're done with that, you'll have to loan it to me so I can read it.
Sure.
All right. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, who is a familiar name. He's a Nobel Prize winning author. He's written, some of his big books are Never Let Me Go and Remains of the Day, both of which have been made into feature films. This book, I think the last book he published was 2017, The Buried Giant, which I did not read. But I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's kind of shares some themes with his book, Never Let Me Go. Never Let Me Go was set in the near future and featured cloning as a theme. This new novel is also set in the near future, but it features a sort of a robot. Her name is Klara. She's powered by the sun, and she's an AF, an artificial friend, and she's designed to be a child's companion. It's got a lot of my favorite things rolled into one book. I like a science fiction story that also has kind of human elements, not just technology. Mythology, it has some suspense and some mystery, and it's also a coming of age story. Even though it's a robot, she's coming of age because she's very human-like. So Klara narrates the story. It starts where she's in the AF store on her perch and she watches and observes humans all the time, fascinated by their emotions and kind of hungry to learn enough about them to be able to help her future owner. She is solar powered and she reveres the sun for her nourishment, and she upholds the sun as sort of a godlike creature. She is bought by teenager Josie eventually, and she continues to learn about humans through her interactions with Josie, Josie's friends, and Josie's family. But when Josie becomes seriously ill, Klara tries to plead with the sun to help her, to make her well again. And so she confronts the boundary between service and sacrifice. So again, in this book, Ishiguro is talking a lot about humanity and what makes a person and what makes life worth living and remembering, and how do our beliefs and our observations change the world and vice versa. So he often deals with that kind of what makes, in the Never Let Me Go, it was about cloning, but it was also about like humanity and what makes a human being. So he deals with kind of some of those big questions, and I look forward to reading this one. Whoa, I keep jumping ahead. Have you ever read his books, Mary?
You know what? I had the Buried Giant like sitting on my shelf forever, and I never got to it, and I
Okay.
always sort of regretted it.
Yeah.
You know what the story kind of reminds me of? What was that movie? Was it I.E. with the young boy who was also artificial intelligence? He was like a friend robot to another young boy with Jude
Yeah.
Law. Anyway, it kind of reminds
Yeah.
me of the same thing.
I don't think I've seen that, but I'll have to look.
It sounds really good. I definitely want to put that on my holds list.
Yeah, I like his writing. He's really, I don't know, he's a really good writer. Okay, next. This one looks good.
Malibu Rising. So initially when I picked this, it was supposed to come out in May 25th, but now it's June 1st. So the publishing dates aren't as hard and fast as they used to be. You know, after COVID, they're changing a little here and there. So I think this one got pushed back a little bit. Let me find it. Okay, so I chose Malibu Rising for a couple of reasons. I think, in January and it's like 17 degrees outside, it's nice to talk about a book where it's warm. There, someplace in the United States, it's actually warm right now. So there is hope for us. And it's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm going to put in a plug for our book club picks, or book club kits. We have a kit that we own by a title by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's called Daisy Jones and the Six, which I loved. And so that's why I'm super excited about this one. So Malibu Rising, August 1983. It's the day of Nina Riva's annual end of the summer party, and anticipation is at a fever pitch. Everyone wants to be around the famous Rivas. Nina, the talented surfer and supermodel, brothers Jay and Hud, one a championship surfer, the other a renowned photographer, and their adored baby sister Kit. Together, the siblings are a source of fascination in Malibu and the world over, especially as the offspring of the legendary singer Mick Riva. The only person not looking forward to the party of the year is Nina herself, who never wanted to be center of attention, and who has also just been very publicly abandoned by her pro tennis husband. Oh, and Hud, remember him? He has it's because it is a long past time for him to confess something to his brother, from whom he's been inseparable since birth. So he needs to confess something to him. Jay, the other brother, on the other hand, is counting the minutes until nightfall, when the girl he can't stop thinking about has promised to be at the party. And lastly, Kit, remember, adorable, adored little Kit. Well, she's got a couple secrets of her own, and she's invited someone to the party that she has told no one that she has invited. So this story essentially, the story is told, it's one of these told almost in a day kind of events. And eventually what happens is by midnight, the party will be completely out of control. And by morning, the Riva mansion will have gone up in flames. Okay, so that's the general idea of the story. Each chapter unveils family secrets as the hour gets closer to the party. And it's also intertwined with flashback scenes that involve their parents, Mick and I'm trying to think of her name, Mick and June. And these flashbacks obviously talk about their relationship, how they ultimately became married and had children, while Nick had this singing career, which took him away from the family and the fallout of that. So what people tend to really like, people are really torn about what they like about this book. People like it, they like it a lot, but it's really interesting. Some people really like the part of the events leading up to the party and all the secrets and the drama, and it's almost like a soap opera. And some people some readers are eating that up and loving it. And other readers feel that what makes the story so great is the backstory of Mick and June, and them coming together. He's obviously a very famous musician, and the fallout of their relationship and how it affects their children. So when you think about this, what comes to mind for me, what's another book where the house goes up in flames? Little Fires Everywhere. 4 children and Little Fires Everywhere. 4 children in this. So there is some, commonality there. But it's one of these 2021 most anticipated novels. I don't think it will disappoint. So,
do you know much about her background? Because it seems she's pretty interested in like musicians and the lives of musicians and things, huh?
Yeah.
David Jones and the Six was all about a band, right? Yeah.
It was really loosely almost based on Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
And another thing is she wrote, which I don't know if you read, Evelyn Hugo's Seven Husbands. I did not read that. So that was actually a fairly well-known book. A lot of people talked about that.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And it has, I've read this over and over again, that one of the husbands, Mick Riva, is the third husband. So yeah, I did not read it, so that's why I don't really want to talk too much about it.
Yeah.
But I do admire that. I do admire that she brings her readers together, and then she strings them along into other novels of hers.
Yeah, carries characters kind of throughout things. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Huh. I'll have to look into that. All right. I didn't even know Paula McLean was having a book come out this year until I actually did some research. And I have never actually read Paula McLean, which is probably kind of shameful. I think everybody in the whole world has read Paula McLean, except for me. But this one sounded really interesting because she goes, I do like historical fiction, which is what she normally writes. But this one, it goes back in time, 20, 30 years, but it's more of a suspense fiction. And so it kind of is quite a bit different than what she normally writes. And, kind of she has looked to her past. I guess she worked in the social services for a while and worked with young people who had, been sexually assaulted or, have suffered abuse in the foster care system. So I think she takes some of that and puts it into this book. So it is also a dark book, but it's kind of a mystery and suspense book as well. It takes place in 1993 in Mendocino, California, and it's told by a missing persons detective, Anna Hart. And it opens with the scene of her child's own death with no details about what has happened. And slowly throughout the book, we kind of reveal what has happened about her loss. But then because of that, she flees her husband and her job. She goes back to her hometown and becomes immersed in helping the local sheriff, who was a childhood friend of hers, with a missing teenager investigation. So there is some real life backstory to this. There was a girl in Petaluma, California, Polly Klaas, who was a missing teenager. So it's kind of, that story runs concurrently with the storyline that's interwoven with this cold case of a missing childhood friend. Lots of stuff going on. Reviewers have said that the story and the writing are excellent, particularly the way we learn Anna's backstory, the relationship with her foster father, Hap, how she learned to navigate the forest, read nonverbal clues, and most significantly, what it felt like to be abandoned as a child and how that scars and shapes a person throughout their life. So that, yes, there's her backstory. There's the story of her child's of the loss of her child, And then there's this, missing teenager set in the present and some kind of cold case of a missing teenager. So there's like 4 storylines in this. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot going on. It's not really a typical police procedural. The case is steered more by Anna's gut feelings based on her own life experiences, as well as her years of experience in locating missing persons. It's supposed to be very atmospheric, small town, lots of talk, and very intense, and looks deeply at feelings and emotions, triggers and responses. It's worth mentioning that if you're triggered by any kind of, scenes of gruesome violence or sexual assault, you would not want to read this book, because apparently there is quite a few of those kinds of scenes in here. So, but I think it, everybody's talked, all the reviews I've read have talked about how, the writing is very poetic and lovely, and it sounds like it's a very sort of emotional book, which I like an emotional thriller. Mm-hmm. So, sounds interesting. Have you heard about this one at all, Mary?
You know what? I did not hear about it until you found it.
Yeah.
And I had the same reaction you did. I was like, oh, Paula McLean has got something coming out.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound anything like the other one that I read by her, which I hope I'm not mixing up my authors. It was the one about Hemingway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which
she's
is very
local, I think. She's a local author. Yeah.
Yeah. This is quite different from that. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy her writing. So yeah, I'm sure it will be popular. And it is cool that she's local. So
yeah, sounds interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, this one sounds cool too.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you started by saying that you had never read anything by Paula McLean, and I have never read anything by Reid Benedict, and I think I'm the only person, in the entire.
I haven't either, but I know Emma, another colleague at work, has read a lot of her stuff. She likes her a lot. Yeah.
She likes her, and she has a following of patrons that come to Emma because they like that and they want Marie Benedict's novels or novels like her novels.
Right.
So I did ask Emma. I said, "Did you read this?" I was hoping to pick her brain on it, and she's like, "No, do you have it?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have it." So it does sound really interesting, though. So I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to read this because it is historical. It is based on actual events, and so I don't want to mess it up. In her 20s, Bella de Costa Green is hired by J.P. Morgan to curate a collection of rare manuscripts, books, and artwork for his newly built Pierpont Morgan Library. Belle becomes a fixture on the New York society scene and one of the most powerful people in the art and book world, known for her impeccable taste and shrewd negotiating for critical works as she helps build a world-class collection. But Belle has a secret, one she must protect at all costs. She was born not Belle de Costa Green, but Belle Marion Greener. She is the daughter of Richard Greener, the first Black graduate of Harvard and a well-known advocate for equality. Belle's complexion isn't dark because of her alleged Portuguese heritage that lets her pass as white. Her complexion is dark because she is African American. So that's the story, and as it unfolds. So Belle is an extraordinary woman, and what I think of with this story is think the nonfiction book Hidden Figures, and think / the fiction book Vanishing Half. That's what I thought. Hidden Figures is about extraordinary African American women, incredibly hardworking, incredibly smart, incredibly passionate about their work, and the lengths and the hurdles that they have to overcome to simply pursue their job, to pursue what they're good at, and it's the same for the personal librarian. Bella how she learns about the job is, I believe she's a librarian, and someone comes to her and says, you should apply for this job. And she does, and she gets it. And as I said, she becomes like a staple in as it says, in the New York society scene, that she's known for her hard work and just, how well she can curate this library and build this library. But then also think Vanishing Half. So we have someone who is you know, who says that she's white, and in fact she is not. Now, it's different in Vanishing Half. I don't really, they're both hiding something, but she is doing it because it was her mother who instilled that in her. It was her mother who left her father and said, we are changing our name, we're changing our identity so that we can move up in the world. And then of course it just becomes, as it does in The Vanishing Half, like a secret that, you know, it becomes more work to maintain the secret than it does just to tell the secret. So it just sounds like a fascinating story, a fascinating woman. And for those of you who like Marie Benedict, I think that this is something that you're really going to enjoy, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's got a lot of depth to it and, you know, backstory. I wonder whatever happened to her in her real life.
I guess we'll find out in the book.
I guess we'll find out. All right. The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. So I, again, sounds like a you know, a repeating theme that I have not read Maggie Shipstead's previous two novels, but as I was kind of researching what books to talk about here, I kept coming back to this one, getting, you know, having people just falling in love with it. And that her first two novels were good, but this one, maybe she has finally written like the novel that'll, you know, make her a big name and get her, you know, more well known. It is a 600, almost 600 page book.
Wow.
So it's a kind of an epic story. I guess she did so much research over like 2 or 3 years and traveled to all these places. And so, yeah, I mean, she's just got gushing reviews for it, but it's a historical novel, a sweeping historical novel that follows the life of a true character, Marion Graves, a woman who only wants to fly planes. And it follows her story through challenging beginnings in rural Montana during Prohibition, through a terrible marriage that forces her to flee to Alaska, to flying with the ATA during World War II, and an attempt to fly around the world. And then interspersed with her story, a century later, the author weaves a modern story of a woman named Hadley Baxter. And she's a movie star actually playing Marion Graves in a movie. So Hadley also faces many challenges, but she latches onto Marion's story and becomes determined to learn the truth about her. It's almost 600 pages, but it has a driving narrative and a mysterious ending, which keeps the pages turning. And apparently there are stunning descriptions of like all the locales that it's set in, from Montana to Alaska to Antarctica between 1920 and 1950. And there's lots of in-depth discussions like of aviation and art, about solitude and the impact of war and the evolution of personal identity. So it's kind of one of those giant, sweeping, epic books that you can get lost in, that lifts you out of everyday life. So I think it sounds fascinating. I think the characters sound really interesting, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I love a good description of different places, and just like I said, I just got these gushing reviews, and people loved it. You know, they said maybe the first 40 pages, keep going, you know, and you'll be lost in it. And again, I think in this climate, kind of when we're all isolated and alone, sometimes it's amazing to get lost in a great big epic novel. And I haven't read one of those in a while. I think maybe The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is one of my favorites. I don't know if you've ever read that.
No, but I do know about it, yeah.
I love a big, thick, sweeping novel that teaches me, you know, I learn about a lot in it. So I look forward to it.
I mean, that's a great description because, you know, you hear 600 and you're like, oh, pass. But, yeah, you know, the way that you describe it and what's been talked about with it, it does sound very enticing.
Yeah. It says it's good for, you know, if you like Kristen Hanna or you like Paul McLean, or what else did they talk about? Christina Baker Klein's books, those kinds of authors, you know. So. Oh, we're done. Well, we're not done.
Well, yeah, just a little blurbs about some additional titles. So,
Yeah, these are a few other titles that we're looking forward to. So I kind of put your three first, Mary, if you want to run through them quickly, and then
yeah.
I'll talk about mine.
Okay, so I can see of Women in Salt. This is a debut novel by Gabriela Garcia. It's the daughter of a Cuban immigrant, battles addiction and the fallout of her decision to take in the child of an ICE detainee while her mother wrestles with displacement trauma and complicated family ties. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Sounds almost a little confusing. People are raving about this.
I
It's a debut novel.
Yeah,
The publisher is putting out 200,000 first printings, which
really?
yes, that's a
That's
pretty good
big.
number
Yeah.
for a debut author. It spans 5 generations from 19th century Cuba to present day Miami and Mexico. What people love about it are the strong female characters and how attached they are to them.
Yeah, that sounds good. I wanted to read that one too. I will talk a little bit about Infinite Country, which is also a similar theme to the previous one. It's set in Colombia, though, and the US. And it's about a family who, they immigrate to America, they overstay their tourist visa, they start a family, and then the husband is deported, and the wife has to kind of hold her family together alone. Um, Again, this one has like a 75,000. I thought that was big printing. And it's been getting lots of rave reviews. And I really am interested in, that topic of, I have a husband from South America, so I read a lot of South American authors, and this one sounds really good, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'll talk briefly about Good Company. Oh, I was just going to say oh, never mind. Never mind. I had my authors confused. Never mind. So
All
I'm
right.
going to talk about Good Company by Cynthia Sweeney. She also wrote The Nest. I think a lot of people out there probably read The Nest. I read it. I loved it. So here we are. Flora has been happily married to Julian for over 20 years. One day she stumbles upon an envelope which contains her husband's wedding ring, which he has claimed to her that he lost a long, long time ago. So a little backstory on Flora and Julian is that they have struggled for many years in their marriage by just scraping by on, fly by night acting careers and trying to support Julian's small theater company called, what do you know, Good Company. They eventually moved to LA where they find much more professional success. And Flora is reunited with her best friend, Margot, who is now a bona fide TV star. Back to Flora finds the wedding ring in this envelope, and she is beginning to think, has her life been built on a bunch of lies? Good Company tells a big-hearted story of lifelong relationships that both wound us and heal us. So think husband, best friend.
I like The Nest a lot too. So I think, yeah, she tells a good story, that Cynthia.
She does.
Um, The other book, one of the other books wanted to talk about was Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. So Jhumpa Lahiri, she wrote The Namesake and The Interpreter of Maladies, which got lots of awards. And she hasn't written anything for a while. I think she's actually originally from India, but she has been living in Rome for quite some time. And this book was originally written in Italian, and then she translated it into English. And I think it's probably kind of a specialized book for people that really like literary fiction. I'm not sure that it has a really strong plot, but um, it's supposed to be kind of just a really kind of interesting book. It follows a woman over a year as she restlessly walks her city, finding some solace in the streets, bars, and piazzas. But she's torn between wanting to connect and resisting the idea of binding herself more closely to friends and colleagues, her isolated mother, and a mysterious man readers know only as him. So it's not, a traditional storyline. It is a little experimental. Then if you're a literary fiction lover, you might like it. She's a good writer.
So the last one I'm going to do a shout out for is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe. It caught my attention, quite honestly, because I just read Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe about the troubles in Ireland. It was a I think it's been out for a couple of years. It was absolutely fantastic. His writing is phenomenal. So that's where it caught my attention. And then when I read a little more about it, it sounds really interesting. It's a grand, devastating portrait of 3 generations of the Sackler family, famed for their philanthropy, whose fortune was built by Valium and whose reputation was destroyed by OxyContin.
Wow.
So this is a family of 3 brothers. It goes through many generations. It starts, I think it starts like in the Great Depression. It's not an easy, happy start for these 3 brothers. And one of them is, he's the one that he ends up at a mental institution working, I believe. And he's the one who eventually comes up with Valium. And aside from that, he's just a master marketer. And so he makes a fortune off of Valium. And the story talks about what greed and being a bazillionaire can do to your family and how they came to the decisions that they made. And, we all know the terrible fallout of OxyContin to, our country. So, and, with Patrick, Red, and Keith telling the story, you just can't go wrong. So I'm excited about this.
It's got to be good. I just checked out Say Nothing by that author in audio form, so I'm hoping to listen to that soon.
The audio form is great. It's a gentleman with a brogue, and it's
going to be perfect. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is The Hidden Palace by Helene Wecker. So this is a follow-up to her book, The Golem and the Jinni, which I believe she wrote like 2013, so it's been quite a long time. And that book was it was set in 19th century America, New York City, and it was about a woman who is a golem, which in Yiddish folklore is like a woman made out of clay. And she is made to marry a man in New York. So she's sent to New York to marry. They turn alive, kind of. It's folklore. And the man, she doesn't marry the man, and then she meets a jinni, which is a Middle Eastern kind of genie, and they form a friendship and survive together in New York. So it's kind of got this sort of fantasy element mixed in with kind of historical fiction. So this is the book coming after their story. So it kind of, their names are Chava and Ahmed, and this is the continuation of their stories and their story. And, I don't know too much more about it, but I'm very much looking forward to it because I really love The Golem and the Jinni. So I like books that they're historical and they have, some myth and fable and Yiddish history, Yiddish mythology and Middle Eastern mythology kind of all tumbled together. So a fun one. All right. And I'm sure there are many, 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 many more great books coming out this spring. And
honestly, Dori, it was so hard to choose. There are so many good ones. There are so many, we really had to whittle the list down to what we talked about today. So you are right on that.
Yeah. I will send out to anybody that registers for this program kind of a link to this discussion, but also some links to some lists of books that are coming out this spring. There's quite a few online. And Mary and I will be back in early summer, probably early June, and we'll talk about some summer beach reads or just good summer books to read, right?
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
All right. Take care, Mary.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.